पर अंतर्राष्ट्रीय विमेंस डे में हम लगातार आपके लिए विमेन वॉइसेस ला रहे हैं, टॉप विमेन लीडर्स ला रहे हैं फ्रॉम अक्रॉस द कंट्री, अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड. हम उनसे जान रहे हैं उनकी जर्नी, द इंस्पिरेशन दैट वी विल ड्रॉ फ्रॉम देयर जर्नी, देयर लाइफ, एंड रियली अंडरस्टैंड क्या होता है टू बी अ वुमन लीडर. आज मेरे साथ जो गेस्ट जुड़ रही हैं वो है मंजरी चौधरी, who is the executive director, legal and general counsel at India's largest car company, जी हाँ, मारुति सुजुकी. मंजरी जी, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. वेलकम ऑन द शो एंड थैंक यू फॉर योर टाइम. सबसे पहले, जैसे हम इस सीरीज में हर विमेन की जर्नी से इंस्पायर हो रहे हैं, उनकी जर्नी समझ रहे हैं, आप बताइए आपकी जर्नी इन मारुति. इफ यू कैन जस्ट गिव अस योर बैकग्राउंड एंड the whole many years that you've taken and been in the corporate world. कैसा रहा सफर मैम?
Thank you, Swati, and thank you, Zee, for inviting me on this conversation today. It's absolutely my pleasure to be on the show. जैसा कि आपने कहा स्वाति कि मेरी जर्नी कैसी रही है, so जर्नी बहुत लंबी है और करीबन 30 साल हो गए हैं. So शुरू तो एक प्रोफेसर के तौर पे हुई थी. I was teaching, I was an academician, and from there I moved on to being a lawyer. So it started at about the age of 31, when most people have already settled into their professions. I began a new one. So my first challenge was there, and it's been a long ride. But a very satisfying ride, if I might say. It has had its ups and downs, a lot of perseverance, hard work, and the sheer determination to continue and to make it work. So spent the initial few years of my legal career with a law firm, a top law firm in Delhi, and then was part of General Electric. I did global roles, South Asia roles across diverse businesses like plastics, healthcare, power, and then moved into an extremely diverse and a very different field of work, or sector industry, that was auto. And Maruti happened about exactly 4 years ago from now, and I decided to join them. I mean, there were some apprehension, since I was going to be the only diverse member in the top leadership at that time, but I found that very exciting one, and also spoke a lot about the way Maruti was looking at diversity in trying to bring in diversity at that level. So here I am 4 years later, and it's been a great learning experience with Maruti, which was absolutely chalk and cheese from General Electric. Being an old PSU and a Japanese entity now, the culture is being very diverse, but then that is the fun of it, I think. And absolutely, how do you assimilate into new cultures? How do you adapt? I think everybody's doing the same thing, except they do it differently. And being different, like they talk about Maggie sauce, you see, remember they used to say a different hair. So it is, Maruti is different. And I've completely enjoyed my stay with them in the last 4 years, and it's been a great journey so far.
Wonderful. I think the two big takeaways that I will take from your journey, जो आपने अभी बताई, वो एक तो perseverance. I think that's a very very strong word, and I think truly rewarding. I think ऐसा कोई भी इंसान नहीं है जिसने अगर perseverance किया हो लाइफ में, उसको रिजल्ट्स ना मिले हो. That whole attempt to keep doing things, that's one. And of course the other bit of you saying आपने देर से शुरुआत की, but it's never too late, as they say. Where there's a will, there's a way. So great. Lovely to know the background really. And आपसे मैं जानना चाहूंगी, आपके पास इतना साल का एक्सपीरियंस, अनुभव है, and women role in organizations, कैसे इवॉल्व हुआ है? आपने कहा आप अकेले थे when you joined in the top leadership team of this company, for example, and now of course things are changing. So the शुरुआती समय था to what it is today, the role of women, how it's evolved over years.
Swati, great question, and I think we are all aware. I think everybody sees it around them. There is a change, a perceptible change. I think when I joined the legal profession so many years back, there were barely any women, and the women were more in terms of corporations. Litigators were less. the boardrooms didn't have that much of representation of women. There has been a significant change, I would say. Practically, the first thing that has brought about that change is because the government has really, the policy framework has been created in such a manner that encourages representation of women across organizations, in boardrooms and elsewhere. That's one. So sometimes you have to have policy in order to give it the initial push. But even after that, I feel that personally, I think women themselves have seen the globalization has brought about so much of change in the way people are viewing things. At a societal level, I think the acceptance of women going to work and acceptance of women now becoming bread earners is much more. And personal perseverance, I think, from the women themselves, young girls and their families, to see them do better. Of course, one can argue that this is more so in larger cities and metros, etc. And there's a vast population of women that still needs that impetus. True, I agree. But then when we look at it in whole numbers, I think there has been a significant shift. Today, you find United Nations talking of their sustainable goals for 2030, and they talk of eradicating gender discrimination, so that women have equal parity and equal opportunities of growth in organizations. So there has been a journey that has traveled, and some of the numbers really speak for themselves. The representation of women in corporate India has increased from 21% to 30% now, and I'm talking of a survey that was done by Zinnov and Intel sometime in 2019, and I'm sure it must have increased even more in the last 2-3 years. Of course, the representation is more in non-technical roles than as opposed to technical ones. The representation is much more at the junior levels. It kind of dwindles at the mid to the senior levels, from being 38 at junior levels to only about 11% at senior levels. Boards have seen a remarkable increase from about 13% in 2018 to about 17% today. And of course, that is also necessitated by the changes that the law brought about, where you have to have a woman independent director in all listed entities and some specific private entities. But in spite of that also, I think when there are more organizations being run by women, so obviously there would be a greater promotion of diversity. So life has changed. The role of women in organizations has certainly seen a sea change. When you have more women, then further changes come from there. The inception is to bring about greater numbers. So there has been a significant.
Okay, so those are some of the observations that we've seen in the last few years when it comes to, I think, acknowledging the role of women. I think that's a very, very strong point. We all agree that that acceptance has come in. Of course, there is so much more that we need to do, but the good thing is we are on the right track. So that's heartening to know. The numbers are talking from that point. मैं जानना चाहूंगी, as somebody who's at the lead and at the top position, and when it comes to gender diversity, I think organizations play a very critical role. I think the DNA, the way the organization look at it as part of its own culture, वो बहुत जरूरी हो जाता है. तो मैं Maruti Suzuki, as the leader in its space that it works, and also kind of a global organization, of course Japanese with India, and for such a long time they've been there. कैसे आप अपनी कंपनी में ये change लाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं? Is it all about just the women, or do you think यहाँ पर training for men is equally important to understand and accept their decision making too?
स्वाति, आप एक बहुत अच्छा आपने पॉइंट बताया कि diversity, to encourage diversity is not only the job of women. It in organizational levels, it has to be run as a tone from the top. So when you talk of organizations, and organizations that have taken strides in this direction, you can easily see that it is something that is mandated. That's a cultural shift is coming within organizations. So to your point, I think if for organizations to encourage diversity, certainly needs to be a tone from the top, certainly the board, the senior management, and it has to be a little more institutionalized. Now, when you ask me how can that be done, I think there are some very simple ways of doing it. just as you run any other vertical in your organization, which has a budget, which is treated like a P&L and has measurable deliverables and outcomes, I think managing diversity and inclusion in the organization should be done in the same way, with the same sense of priority and focus. And when it is driven from the top, it is measured, outcomes are measured. What have you achieved? How can you achieve more? What is it that is impeding success? And having discussions, fruitful and meaningful discussions at senior management level, at the board level, I think will go a long way in making this shift and change happen. Now, when you come to Maruti, you know, let me set the context about Maruti is a large industrial giant, and like typical all industrial organizations, change management is a challenge, and it's something that we have to acknowledge. And within that framework, let me say that Maruti has been seeing a sea change now in different ways. We have begun to look at diversity. We have begun to acknowledge the fact that, you know, even in a manufacturing setup, we can see more contribution of women going forward. So, you know, let me give you numbers. We actually have 19% of our production workforce is women. 24% of our engineering workforce today is diverse. So there are strides being made. I think right at that inception, we hire more. Of course, then comes, once it's hired, then you have to see and, you know, keep them retained, keep them motivated. So women have their own challenges. They motherhood, marriages, they have a whole family, a social and cultural setup to take care of, other than just being a very sound professional. So it's a tough act to balance, and a rather difficult one at times. But again, there are choices to be made. How organizations can help that journey, I think, is by acknowledging the fact that the journey is tough. There is a balance required. How can we support them? We can support them by creating a more willing and inclusive environment, so that women feel at par with men. And you know, that really brings me to that topic of not only gender diversity, but talking of gender parity. I think that is more important. Gender diversity is only about being given a ticket to the party. Whether you're allowed on the dance floor or not is all about gender parity and inclusivity, right?
True.
So inclusion is very important. When women are given the right environment to function, which is at equal par with any other members of the organization, I think they have the wherewithal to flourish, you know, and they can manage. Sometimes I've seen younger women say, why mentoring only for us? It should be for everyone. So it is not about something extra that needs to be done. It's about giving them the same inclusive environment, treating them the same. Like I was reading a Harvard Business Review study on this, and they talked of something called normative acceptance, where diversity is accepted as a normal. You will find those organizations having many more women at the top, and doing professionally and financially and productively much better. It is about that. Usually that thing does not happen by just creating policies and procedures. You know, that is something being thrust upon, whereas something which is more inclusive, you know, from that perspective. And in Maruti, we've tried to, you know, make strides. Of course, it's not easy in a large organization. We've taken some steps, and it's work in progress. And I am quite confident that going forward, it is going to lead to many more successes going down the path. One of the things, Swati, that I'd like to draw your attention to, now that you've asked me about Maruti, is the Porsche Act is something that the government has brought about, you know, the regulation. It is something that all of us have to adhere to. Now, that could be just a policy that you have to comply with. What we have done in Maruti around Porsche is to take it to the next level. It's not about training diverse members on Porsche. It is about training the others in the organization about what Porsche is. Today, we hold trainings across the organization, more specifically for our managers. All people managers must understand that, and a vast majority of them are, of course, men. People at senior management and even at the board level. So we've created an e-posh module during the last 2 years of the pandemic, where it was difficult to get people within the classroom to give them training. We created an e-posh module, and I'm very pleased to tell you that we have almost 100% hit on that. And across an organization that is so large, of over close to about 11,000 white-collared employees, and all of them have taken that training. So my intent is that when you continue to do those trainings, after a while, the mindset changes. And that is what we are all driving towards. That is exactly what is going to lead to better parity and more inclusiveness.
Amazing. And I think it can't have been put in better words than that. Absolutely. I think it's really now walking the talk. We understand what's needed. We need to now just put it as part of the DNA of the organization, as you said, and thrust upon that as something which is very close, which is more about gender parity than gender diversity. I agree with you. Quickly, Manjaree, आपकी journey, जब हम बात करते हैं, especially when you did talk about and touched upon the fact that our biological clock and our work growth, career, I would rather say, are very like it coincides. And sometimes you have to make those choices, you said, you have to prioritize. And then, of course, it's always a tussle and task. But I think we can inspire and get inspired from each other, because it's not like log nahi kar pate hain. There are some success stories and there are some stories that have not been successful. But let's look at the ones that have been successful. What were some of the things that you faced in your career? Was it tough for you? How did you deal with it when it was, you have to choose between a parents-teacher meeting to important board meeting that you perhaps had to be there for? I mean, how do you balance work life?
Ms. Swati, to your point, I think in some ways, I think I was, the platform provided to me was a little more inclusive. I came from a family where I had a mother as a role model, which happened to be one of the few women civil servants in the country to begin with. So there was a big role model at home, which always encouraged you to excel and do your best. Of course, do whatever you liked, but what you did take up, do it to the best of your ability. So that was always the case. A very supportive family. Of course, I am single. So at a point where I became single, I had to, there was a huge support from the family that was there, and, continuing to egg me on, motivate me, never let me down. I've had my moments. When you start a career 7 years behind your peers, I'm sure everyone would appreciate and understand that there were challenges. There were frustrations because you realize that you're behind and you have a lot of catching up to do. But I learned a few home truths during that time. One was, of course, the huge support of the family, who continued to tell me that your day will come. Tumhara wo kehte na, tumhara number aayega, so hang on. So, your time will come. So it is never easy. And that brought me to what I today, when people ask me that, what is it that you would like to talk about and suggest that what people should do, I think patience became one of the key parts. Not that it is only meant for women to be patient. I think for any human being to succeed. And studies have shown that, people who are patient will end up being more successful in life, right? Because meeting challenges, sometimes variables are not under your control. How do you manage variables that you can control? How do you accept variables that you can't? How do you navigate them and then move on? I think is a very big learning that I had. So I've had my moments, and there have been tough times. I was fortunate enough to work in a company like General Electric, where I thought I flourished, because I think gender parity was quite evolved in that organization. And it was so well mandated that if you did your job well and you had the potential, you were able to rise. And that was a great thing. Now that I'm in Maruti, I think I came with a mandate. They brought me in. I think I've had the support of my seniors in that. So I think we are making some progress, and some good progress, which I hope to carry forward.
Okay, very quickly, last minute, we want to understand from you a quick message that you would like to give to young, aspiring women who are out there. The world is obviously constantly changing and evolving. So, it always helps to understand what they should watch out for, look out for? It's like a nice message that they should always keep in mind if they're aspiring to be good leaders
Yeah.
of tomorrow.
Yeah. Yes, Swati, I think very important. First, I would always tell the women that, you're special, so treat yourself as special. And with that, I think I always have had my entire journey and my entire career and what I've achieved, I think I boil it down to 5 P's, as I always call them. Each of them has a lot of meaning. They're not as simple as they look. And the first is passion. If you got to have passion for what you wish to do. If you want to be a professional, you got to be terribly passionate about it, because there will be many moments where that passion is hugely threatened, and you got to hold on to it for as long as you can. So I think being passionate drives and takes you forward. It doesn't let you give up. The second is, and you talked about that, was perseverance. We talked about it. There is no substitute. I give it the nice name of perseverance, but it means a lot of hard work. It also means not giving up. Perseverance is also about not giving up. Challenges will always come. When you are running life, who said life was easy? I mean, it is difficult. It is difficult for everyone. And it's never easy ride for anyone. So all of us have to go through our paces and our challenges, but to hold on, to stick, to have that belief that I'll find a way out of this, making the right trade-offs. For women, that becomes extremely important, because they have to make trade-offs. So whether at the time when they're being married, at the time when motherhood comes in, at the time when, the spouse gets a job in another area and then you are somewhere else, how do you make those trade-offs? They're not easy, but we can still do it, so. And finally, keep the pride and continue to have patience.
Okay, pride and patience with perseverance and passion. Thank you so much for your time, Manjaree. Lovely to have you.
Thank you, Swati. It was my pleasure. Thank you so much.